Hello, I'm Scott Cherry, editor of TalentTawheed.com and a non-traditional student at the University of Michigan-Dearborn. Last fall, a professor at U of M-Dearborn, Dr. Scott DeGregorio, told his class that only 18% of the information in the Gospels is true. None of the students challenged that spurious claim at the time, but one student shared it with me later that day. Today's university students should not be surprised to encounter professors who are skeptical about the supernatural aspects of religion. This is true concerning the Bible and its supernatural truth claims, and especially of those attributed to Jesus. The Bible's New Testament opens with 4 books called Gospels, which focus on an extraordinary figure named Jesus, who was a miracle worker, who was ultimately crucified, then raised from the dead. Those Gospels include Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, in that order. With significant details, they portray this Jesus as a supremely good man who said very strange things about himself and his relationship to God. Indeed, if the writers of the Gospels told the truth, Jesus claimed to have eternal origins and the very authority of God himself. But that is precisely the all-important question. Did they tell the truth? In other words, are the Gospels true? Do they really give us a true account of this Jesus upon whom Christianity is founded? Are the Gospels good history, or are they so embellished as to consign them to mythology or historical fiction? Skeptics like Professor Scott DeGregorio ascribe to the latter view, as does former philosophy professor David Skrbina and not a few other scholars such as Bart Ehrman of UNC Chapel Hill. But in the opposite corner, many PhD scholars, such as Dr. Dan Wallace, confidently assert that the Gospels are true history and present an accurate account of the risen Jesus, who claimed to be the prophesied Messiah, Savior, and Lord. I'll introduce more of these scholars in later micro-talks. Meanwhile, Dr. Scott DeGregorio is a professor of English at U of M-Dearborn. The courses he teaches include The Bible as Literature, Jesus and the Gospels, and an honors seminar in which the trial of Jesus is one of 4 historical episodes in focus. Have you had him for one of these courses? In recent years, I've had a fair number of conversations with students who have, and sadly, none of their reports have been encouraging. Every student described how Professor DeGregorio disparages the New Testament's 4 Gospels as non-historical legend or fiction in an unbalanced way, and allows for little dissension from Christians in his classes. These students also shared that they were afraid to challenge DeGregorio for fear of their grades. Recently, I was sitting in the University Center with yet another such student, but I didn't know it at first, nor was I fishing for this information. As we were chatting, I routinely asked the student about the progress of classes, which he was not reluctant to share. Eventually, this student willingly shared about his or her experience with Professor DeGregorio. The student was troubled by Professor DeGregorio's statement above and other ones like it. As with other students, she was struck with Professor's intellectual bias and skepticism against the Gospels. Okay, everyone has their opinions, but why can't even a skeptical professor such as DeGregorio be more balanced by fairly presenting the historical evidence on both sides? There is a worthy perspective that deserves attention, with strong evidence for why the Gospel's historical narratives are credible, and which students deserve to hear. In subsequent videos, I'll begin to present the evidence for this perspective. This is not the first time I've experienced this, a student speaking about a professor's skeptical bias toward the Gospels. An almost identical thing happened the previous fall with a student who had Professor David Skrbina for a philosophy course, in which Skrbina also disparaged the Gospels. In both cases, and others, the students were highly reluctant to express their disagreement with the professor, for fear that it would damage their grade. They affirmed the historical credibility of the Gospel's portrait of Jesus as celebrated by Christianity for 2 millennia. To Dr. Skrbina's credit, twice he has been willing to defend his views and subject them to scrutiny in the public eye. Last fall at Wayne State University, he conducted a public debate with Dr. Peter Williamson on the question, Is Jesus a Hoax? A remix of a debate that the same two professors conducted at U of M Dearborn in 2014. On the other hand, Dr. DeGregorio has been far less agreeable to defend his views publicly. He has declined 3 challenges to conduct public debates with 2 scholars from nearby colleges and myself. I hold that if he is going to impose his skepticism toward Jesus and the Gospels upon his students in the name of history and the secular university, he should be willing to defend his views among a wider audience of students and scholars from U of M Dearborn and beyond. Dr. Scott, step up to the plate. In the next micro talk, I wish to put forth reasons why the Gospel's composite portrait of Jesus is credible and true as seen through the lenses of historical analysis. The Jesus that has been Christianity's central focus of reason, faith, and worship for 2 millennia deserves our full confidence.